Well, y'all just need to stop calling America racist. Stop calling America racist. America's not racist. I live in the state of Alabama.
I'm actually surprised I'm shocked. Like, legit, I'm surprised that my brain is still trying to process what happened last week. Because it shouldn't be. This country is built on hurting black people.
It has always been racism with these people.
I'm not making this video to start a race war. I'm making this video because I think one of the biggest reasons this country keeps ripping itself apart is because people have forgotten how to listen to pain without making it about themselves. And from the outside looking in, something I've noticed over and over again is that a lot of black people are not asking to be worshipped. They're not asking for pity. They're not asking for special treatment. A lot of the time, most of the time, they're just trying to explain what life has felt like for them and their families. And somehow, the second those conversations start, everything turns into a debate. No listening, no understanding, no curiosity, a debate. Are you sure it was racism? Well, that happens to everybody. Just get over it. My family struggled too. You're playing victim. You're dividing people. That was a long time ago. Just work harder. And it's like, damn. Can somebody speak about pain without immediately being cross-examined like they're in court?
It has always been racism with these people. I need you to understand that the Civil Rights Act was only passed 62 years ago. The average age of the House is 57. The average age of the Senate is 64. The average age of the Supreme Court, which just dismantled the Voting Rights Act, leading to these map redraws disenfranchising black voters across red states, is over 65. The president was damn near a grown man when the Civil Rights Act was passed. The same guy who took out an ad advocating for the death penalty for the Central Park Five. Half these people in power are older than the civil rights legislation in the US. And do you think everybody just changed their minds and got along after it was passed? No. Businesses in the South shut their doors rather than serve black Americans. Public spaces like city and county pools closed down rather than integrate. Public schools shut down rather than integrate. You had shootings on public beaches in places like Texas, mob beatings in places like Georgia, police beatings across the country. We've had lawsuits about desegregation all the way up into the early 2000s in places like Texas. In the wake of Katrina, you had white people just taking pot shots and shooting at and killing black Americans in the street just for being outside and calling them looters. You've got people being found hanging from trees in modern times. We've got the media calling one group of people rioters and another group of people doing the same thing, but maybe even more violent, peaceful protesters, or just going on a guided tour. It has always been about discrimination, subjugation, and opportunity for a specific group. And to the women who voted for this, do not be shocked when the voices calling for an end to the 19th Amendment, which are on your side, start to get louder. Do not be shocked if a court case comes down the pipe and this time it's aimed at you. Because again, it's liberty, representation, and opportunity for one group. Just look at their slogan. First of all, America has never been great for everyone. But make America great again. The time frame they're talking about, it was only great for one group that looked like this. And we should be great. We should be the greatest country in the world for everyone here. But unless we get these people out of power and undo the damage they have done, we never will be.
White man from the South says they saw black people as pets.
As far as the colored people were concerned, I feel that they were a good bit happier than they are now. They had less in the way of material things. But I can remember back in the 20s, when I was a small boy, they were always singing at their work. They had a great sense of humor. And now today, they just don't seem to care much about that as they used to. And I think they've lost their sense of somewhat, which I deplore.
Mr. Hasty, what did you think we were before you began to think of us as human beings?
Well, in a way, we thought of you almost as a very superior pet. Something, or rather someone, we had to take care of. Because we had to do so much of their thinking for them. We had to do almost everything for them that, except living their own lives. Anything outside, we had to do for them.
Do you realize that the most racist scientific community ever were 19th century anthropologists? They're the ones that set up the race and the this, and white male humans were at the top of the evolutionary ladder, and blacks and everybody else were lower, closer to the apes and all of this. If you called someone Neanderthal, that was an insult. Like, they're still evolving. In the 1990s, now that we can do genetic tracking and things, the world found out that Europeans are between 1% and 3% Neanderthal genetically, and Africans are 0% Neanderthal. So in the 1990s, research papers started coming out talking about how creative and imaginative the Neanderthals must have been.
Stop looking at the people. Stay focused on your mission. Your time will come. And the difference is you'll still be there when they're gone, because you're doing it the right way, the ethical way. And it's going to take you more time, because you've got to learn how to be focused with the noise all around you. You're always going to see people who are not doing things the right way seem like they're getting ahead. And what they're really doing is just using the principles. You operate in the principles, but keep your integrity and your intentions right. That is how you outlast, outplay. It's time, detail, and effort. Keep going. Stop looking to the left or the right.
I'm actually surprised I'm shocked. Like, legit, I'm surprised that my brain is still trying to process what happened last week, because it shouldn't be. This country is built on hurting black people. The United States of America they'll if they hear that they can hurt a black person, they'll get it done in minutes. If they hear that they are going to help somebody, they'll have to set up studies. They'll have to have whole committee meetings about it, all this different shit. They got to the Voting Rights Act. They pulled out them old racist maps. They went, here you go. And in Alabama, they had tornado warnings going off. They could have been killed by a tornado, but instead they said, wait a second, before we run down to the shelter, we got to go get rid of black representation. In Tennessee, they went and destroyed the coverage of Memphis. In Mississippi, they are going to go use the building where they seceded from the Union. Because their current building's under work. They could wait. They could just wait until the building's ready. And in a lot of these places, they're suspending primary elections that have already started. And the thing is you go, okay, well, maybe the Democrats can push back. Well, I don't think you're missing a big part of the issue here, which is that in this country, if you're a Republican and you want to hurt black people, there are no laws to stop you. But if you're a Democrat, you want to make anything better, not only do you have to be perfect, but every single court in the fucking country will show up and kick your shit in. Because that's what just happened today in Virginia. They set up a 10-1 remander, try to fix this shit to counteract Texas, and the Virginia Supreme Court said, no, how dare you? You can't possibly use the weapons of the enemy. We have to let it be perfect. Even though the voters chose in Virginia. The voters chose that map in Virginia. In Texas, Alabama, Tennessee, Mississippi. God damn! What they had to do? Get a bunch of white men in suits and ties to go, boom, map's gone. They didn't have to hold an election. They didn't have to hold a fucking press conference. They didn't have to do any of that shit. And now who's going to suffer? Black people. Black people are going to suffer. And here's the thing I know about black suffering in this country. It trickles up. It trickles the fuck up to everybody else. Because the whole purpose of what the South wants to do right now is to reinstitute a hierarchy with just a few white families on the top and a bunch of dumb fucks stuck in the middle and an entire base of black people that those dumb fucks can look down on. That's where we are. That's where we've always been. But for the last 60 years, we had the veneer that we had moved past it. Enjoy your $2.50, America.
It's only been 1 week since the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act, and southern states have already undone decades of progress. Florida immediately jammed through new maps, even though they passed a constitutional amendment in 2010 against gerrymandering. Louisiana suspended their primary to push for new maps, even though 42,000 votes have already been cast. Tennessee Republicans just voted to break up Memphis and get rid of the only majority black district in the state. Alabama Republicans passed a measure to delay their primary if courts allow them to redraw maps. South Carolina Republicans are extending their legislative session to, you guessed it, gerrymander their maps. That's all in 1 week without Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. 1 fucking week. A single week and Black Americans across the South are about to lose equal representation. It's almost like the entire civil rights movement was aimed at passing the Voting Rights Act for a reason.
See, black folks know why they're here. Native peoples know why they're here and how they got here. A lot of Asian folk know, particularly if they're Chinese American, they know they got here because their ancestors were brought over to work on the railroads by the railroad barons who didn't care if thousands of them died laying track 19, 20 hours a day. But for those of us who are from Europe, we have this fiction that we've told, and we believe it, even though there's no truth to it. You know what the fiction is? It's two parts. Number one, we say things like, with regard to Mexicans coming over the border, with regard to immigrants coming over, but only that border. That's the only one we care about, right? The southern border. I find that interesting. We're not flipping out about Canada, right? We don't have any of the Minutemen or the anti-immigrant groups sitting off the coast of Nova Scotia with a gun and a scope trying to like pick off the sneaky Canadians that are trying to sneak in here for our superior healthcare system, which after all would be a pretty stupid thing to do. But in any event, we only care about that one border, forgetting for a minute that that border was created at the end of a war that was started on false pretense by this country, after which we jacked half of their country. And you weren't taught that in school either, because our history books aren't interested in telling the truth. They tell this very patriotic history that has no relationship to the fact. So that border is artificial. Mexican folk who are coming here, documented or not, let's be clear, are coming home. Their families were here before our families were here in almost every instance. But we forget that, and then we say things like, well, I don't mind them coming. I just want them to come legally like my people did. The hell does that even mean? Come legally? There was no law to break when our people came. The fact that we didn't break a law that didn't even exist, you don't get cookies for that. You don't get like a pat on the back and a gold star because your great whatever was law abiding when there was no law that he could have violated even if he wanted to. But we've told this lie that we came for these upstanding principles. So we'll say things like, well, you know, our people came for liberty and freedom, democracy. These people are just coming for stuff. They're just coming for jobs. They're just coming for healthcare. They're just coming for stuff. We came for high-minded principle, right? Because we believe that. What kind of third grade version of American history is that, right? Like when Donald Trump says, well, Mexico's not sending their best. What the hell, you think Europe sent their best? Europe? No, our people were the losers of Europe. I'm not trying to be an asshole. I'm just telling you the truth. Like, our people were the losers of Europe. The winners didn't get on the boat. You understand what I'm saying? The winners didn't leave. Why the hell would you leave if you were winning? Only the losers left because they had no choice. They were dying. They were starving. They couldn't support their families. A lot of them were convicts who were sold into indentured servitude to work for rich European people. They were barely above the level of a slave themselves. The idea that we had these we didn't believe in liberty and freedom. And we know that because once we got to the colonies, we set up the opposite of liberty.
Trigger warning, this video is going to contain positive information about white people. If you cannot handle that, do not watch any further. So this morning this simple fact came up, that we live in a world of nearly 8 billion people. And only 2 billion of those are white people. We are actually a minority. When compared to people of colour, we're a minority, yet when excluded from the whole minority sort of classification. Now, why is this? How is it possible that we are actually a minority, yet we're not classified as a minority? Clearly, it's because we're doing well. We're doing well. That's not a bad thing. We are obviously doing well. We are doing so well, we've created the illusion that we are actually a minority, when we're a majority, when we in fact are a minority. So what's contributed to this? Now, I've looked into this, I've observed different things about our culture and other cultures, and over years and years and years, and I've made these observations. So the first one is, a big thing is accountability, very, very big factor. When I was growing up, if I ever made any mistakes, if I ever did anything wrong, my parents would never say, oh, it's not your fault, oh, the system's out against you, you're okay, it's everyone else's fault. They would say, what happened? What did you do wrong? What are you going to do about it? Even as you get older, just say, hypothetically, I ended up in jail. My parents wouldn't say, oh, you're a victim, blah, blah, blah. They would say, what did you do? Oh, that's a shame. Why did you do that? What are you going to do about it? So as you're growing up, they would put the onus on you. Now, it wasn't through force either. It wasn't like my dad said, if you don't get an A, I'm going to beat you. So it wasn't like either do well or suffer. It was getting into our heads that everything we do in life and the result of everything we do, it comes down to us. We are ultimately the ones that decide our actions, and our actions determine what happens in life. So, and I could see this in a lot of families growing up, a lot of white families, where the parents would go, why'd you do that? Oh, that's a shame. Why did you do that? What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? Very important. What are you going to do about it? That's a very important point. So accountability, that's a very big thing. That's a strength in white people. I think it's one thing that's helped us to get ahead. The other thing is emotional stability. So again, just say someone called me a name at school, bad names, and I got upset and I went to run to my mother. My mother would say, did they hurt you? No. Well, just ignore them. Just ignore them and they'll go away. She would always say that. Just ignore them and they'd go away. What are you worried about a word? It's just a word. This might seem also insignificant, but as you're growing older, understanding that when someone insults you, even if it's a word you really don't like, it's only sounds coming from someone's mouth. And why would you put so much investment into the other person's opinion? Like if someone called you, for example, if someone called me a colonizer or a snow roach or a cracker, why would I put so much investment into their opinion to begin with? Like, why are you giving so much credibility to the person that's calling you bad things? They're a loser anyway. Ignore them. Who cares about them? What's important is how you receive that. And it's just words, so just ignore it. Be stable. Be emotionally stable. When you hear bad things, that's fine. You can hear bad things, no problem. That's no problem. It's not going to hurt you. You're grown up now. You have emotional stability. And this also definitely helps you pick your battles. So rather than when someone calls me a bad word, rather than kicking their head in or wanting to bash them, I will invest my energy into something more productive. This is not the right time. I'll only be violent when someone attacks my family or attacks me. I'm not going to be violent, because if I'm violent towards someone that's verbally insulting me, the only person I damage is myself. The only person I'm putting at a risk is myself. So accountability and emotional stability are two very, very important qualities that I think are pretty, in white people, are one of our strengths. Those are two of our strengths. So these should be celebrated. And if you're a white person that doesn't have these qualities, these are definitely qualities you want to adapt.
This is a very racist society. I mean, it's pretty shocking. Remember what happened. The constitutional amendments during and after the Civil War were supposed to free African-American slaves. It did something for about 10 years. Then there was a North-South Compact, which essentially granted the former slave-owning states the right to do whatever they wanted. And what they did was criminalize black life in all kinds of ways. Now, that created kind of a slave force. It threw mostly black males, but also women, into jail, where they become a perfect labor force, much better than slaves. If you're a slave owner, you have to keep your capital alive. If the state does it for you, it's terrific. No strikes, no disobedience, perfect labor force. A lot of the American Industrial Revolution in the late 19th, early 20th century is based on that. Actually, it pretty much lasted until the Second World War, when there was a need for what's called free labor in the war industry. After that come about two decades in which African Americans had a kind of a shot entering the society. A black worker get a job in an auto plant. The unions were still functioning. Maybe buy a small house, send a kid to college or something. By the 1970s or 80s, it's going back to criminalization of black life. It's called the drug war, which is a racist war. Ronald Reagan was an extreme racist, didn't hide it. And the whole drug war, so-called, is designed from policing up to eventual release from prison to make it impossible for the black male community and more the women and more Hispanics to be part of the society. In fact, if you look at American history, the first slaves came in 1619, and that's half a millennium. There have been about 3 or 4 decades in which African Americans had a limited degree of freedom. It's not entirely, but at least some. Now, of course, it's for black elites, there's some privileges, but I'm talking about the mass of the population, which has been recriminalized and incidentally also turned into a slave labor force.
Black people literally freed themselves from slavery. And don't try to argue with me in the comments like y'all did on Instagram. People say it was a war for the Union, states' rights, whatever y'all like to teach your children, but the Civil War was literally a war of rebellion and liberation way before the Emancipation Proclamation was even signed, just like the Haitian Revolution was. And the truth is that the Civil War was not about freeing slaves. And for Lincoln, who y'all like to say free the slaves, and for Lincoln, it was all about the preservation of the Union. And y'all love to romanticize white people in the North because they didn't actually enslave, but they still profited off of banks financing plantations and equipment, insurance companies with policies on enslaved black people, the northern cotton mills depending entirely on slave labor for their supply of cotton. Also, a huge one, the transatlantic slave trade primarily came through northern state ports, which literally funded construction in the northern states and directly funded the endowment of all of these prestigious universities like Yale, Harvard, Brown, Princeton. Trust me, the North benefited from and profited off of slavery just like the South did. The economy was just different. A lot of states in the North wouldn't even let free black people live there. And if they did, there were so many restrictions and so many limitations living in the North that there were more freed black people living in southern slave states before the war even started. Now stay with me, I'm about to land. Black abolitionists Harriet Tubman, William Steele, and Frederick Douglass, between the three of them, freed over 1,400 slaves. And not to mention all of the other black abolitionists that we never hear or learn about. So after Lincoln was elected, but before his inauguration, southern states started seceding. They were leaving the Union. 4 of them, South Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi, and Texas, all literally cited slavery as the reason for them seceding from the Union. And I told y'all before, Texas is actually the only state that seceded from 2 different countries to protect slavery. But Lincoln said he literally had no intention of abolishing slavery. White people in the North didn't end slavery because of some moral code that they had. The protection of slavery and abolishing it were both just political pawns used by both white people in the North and white people in the South. And the only reason that Lincoln abolished it was because at this point, it was more convenient to do so in order to protect the Union. So the South wanting to disunion in order to protect slavery is ironically the reason that Lincoln had to abolish it altogether. If the southern states had never started to remove themselves from the Union, it would have been generations before slavery ended in the U.S. And while y'all want to focus on the white people who fought for the North to free slaves, please do not overlook the hundreds of thousands of escaped slaves that stood behind Union lines to fight as well, and how their escapes caused a humanitarian and an economic crisis. They alone are the only reason that emancipation was the only option. And one last thing, I'm going to tell y'all one last thing about the good white folk of the North, right? Those are the same people that manipulated black people to fight for the Union in the first place with the 40 acres and a mule nonsense. But that never happened, even all the way up until 2019 when Bill H.R. 40 was struck down in the House, meaning all the way up until 2019, y'all still refused to give descendants of enslaved black people the 40 acres and a mule.
Keep in mind when folks that look like me say things like, I'm tired of hearing about injustice and inequality and racism in the United States, remember that that very statement is a proclamation of the privilege that white folks enjoy in the United States, because white people can stop thinking at any moment about the issues of injustice, about the issues of inequality. They can busy themselves doing other things instead of thinking about racism. But black people in this nation never enjoy a moment of rest. They have to be vigilant 24/7, reminding themselves of where they are and what they are saying, monitoring their actions and their words and their nonverbals, especially in predominantly white spaces. Why? Because this nation has a history of violence being perpetuated against black people for perceived actions against the white dominant culture. And so remember that black people, in spite of all of the systemic racism that exists, in spite of all of the violence and the history of violence that has been perpetuated against them, in spite of all of the microaggressions and the blatant racism that is exhibited towards their bodies and their lives, black people continue to live lives of excellence. Just imagine if things were equal.
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you are doing great wherever you are watching us from. Have you ever stopped and wonder why after all these years conversation about race in America still make people uncomfortable? Many people like to believe racism is something that happened in the past. They talk about slavery, segregation and discrimination as if those chapters were closed long ago. But What happens when people start digging deeper into history and realize that many of the systems still operate today were built during those very same periods? That's where the real conversation begins. For generations, Americans were taught a version of history that celebrates freedom, equality, and opportunity. But beneath that story lies another reality, one where war. But beneath that story lies another reality, one where entire laws, institutions, and political structure were designed to benefit some groups while excluding others. And for many people, discovering that truth can be shocking. One of the biggest examples is voting rights. When legal protections that were created to prevent racial discrimination in voting are weakened, what happens next becomes very revealing. In several states, political leaders immediately moved to redraw voting maps in way critics argue reduce the political influence of black communities. Think about that for a moment. If the goal was always fairness and equal representation, why does so much energy get spent finding new ways to limit the voices of certain voters? That's the question many Americans are beginning to ask. The uncomfortable truth is that systems don't have to openly announce discrimination to produce discriminatory outcomes. A law can appear neutral on paper while still creating unequal results in practice. History gives us plenty of examples. After slavery officially ended, many states quickly introduced laws that criminalized ordinary behavior among newly freed black Americans. Those laws helped create a prison labor system that looked very different in name but often served similar economic purposes. When one system of control disappeared, another emerged. And that's a pattern that appears again and again throughout American history. Every time progress is made, there seems to be a new obstacle standing in the way, whether it's voter suppression, housing discrimination, unequal schools. Many communities continue dealing with challenges that didn't appear by accident. They were shaped by decades of policy decisions. What makes this conversation difficult is that many people immediately became defensive. The moment someone talk about racial equality, the discussion often shifts away from the issue itself. Instead of listening, people start arguing. They compare struggles, they dismiss experiences, they insist that talking about racism is what creates division, but ignoring a problem has never solved it. You can't fix something if you are unwilling to acknowledge it exists, and that's why so many Americans are re-evaluating the stories they were taught growing up. They are reading original documents, they are examining historical records, they are asking difficult questions, and in many cases they discover that the gaps between the ideal version of America and the lived reality of millions of people is more larger than they ever realized. The goal isn't to make people feel guilty for the past. The goal is to understand how the past continues to shape the present. Because if policies create equalities, then policies can reduce equality. If systems were designed by people, they can be redesigned by people too. But that starts with honesty. It starts with being willing to listen when community describes their experience. It starts with understanding that equality isn't just about what laws say, it's about how those laws affect real people. The question isn't whether injustice exists. History has already answered that. History has already answered that. The real question is whether society is willing to confront the parts of the history that are still influencing the present day. And until that conversation happens honestly, the struggle for the real and until that conversation happens honestly, the struggles for true equality, and until that conversation happens honestly, The struggle for real equalities remain unfinished. Anyway guys, what do you think about this video? Drop your thoughts in the comment section and don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like and share the video to help the channel out. See you in my next video. For now, peace.